And I kid you not, it was like the day before or 2 days before we're gonna fly out. I get a call. Obviously he's upset as well, as I'm devastated, and he's like, unfortunately you're not going to be able to come. Hi guys, and welcome back to Fit with T. I hope you guys are good. So let me tell you guys a story. I'm going to tell you about the times, plural times, that I had stress fractures in my feet. I had stress fractures in the sesamoid bones of my feet. I cannot remember now which foot was first, honestly, because it ended up being both of them over a period of years. But essentially the two little sesamoid bones that you have in the ball of your foot, that's where I actually had stress fractures. Now, if you don't know what a fracture is basically when your bone cracks. And a stress fracture is what's happened because of stress, right? So it's a repetitive injury or an overuse injury. So that part of your foot, well, that part of my foot, I've mentioned before my feet are quite bony, but that part of my foot, basically it ended up getting cracked in those small bones due to running on them, which is what I do as a sprinter. We run, but because of the construct of my foot, the structure of my foot, not having a lot of meat on that part of my foot as well, just a lot of loads, so a lot of running just caused my feet to get fractures in them, unfortunately. Now, I want to talk about the first year that this ever happened to me, and this was 2008. So I was 18 years old. That season I was a junior. So the year previously I had gone to the European Youth Olympics and I had come second in the 100 meters, right? It was one of those where on the line we was trying to decipher whether it was me or the Russian girl that won, and she ended up getting first place with 11:68, and I got 11:69, right? And that was a massive PB for me at 17 years old. The week before I had literally run 12 something. That wasn't my PB, but I had literally run that the week before. So I came to the European Youth Olympics and was able to run PBs every round and come away with a silver medal. Now, going into the second year, my second year as a junior, that year we had a World Junior Championship. So of course, that's what you're going to be aiming for, to make the, well, as a GB athlete, trying to make the GB team. And I actually was successful in doing that. So I managed to be selected for the 4x100 meter relay to go to the World Junior Championships. I cannot remember exactly where it was now without looking. Yeah, so that was where we was at. So that season was a very rocky season because it was my first year where I was experiencing this pain in my feet, right? And it was one of those things where I do not recommend to do what I did in that year and the following year. And that's pretty much why I'm making this video, to say what not to do when you have stress fractures, right? And essentially I continued running on them, not knowing that my feet had stress fractures, not knowing that my feet were actually cracked, essentially. Even if it's very fine crack, even if it's very fine, it doesn't matter really, does it? Even if your bones are bruised, it can be very painful, let alone a stress fracture. So I didn't actually know at the time. I hadn't actually had it assessed yet. I literally had continued throughout the season with that tunnel vision of trying to make the GB team, of trying to make the World Junior Championships, right? And so I've gone through the season up until that point, like I didn't share, but I kind of was always an athlete who, looking at how my seasons generally go and had gone up until that point, it would kind of take me a while to get into my running before I start actually performing well in competitions, right? So going through, obviously as a junior, you still have a time that you're trying to achieve to make a qualification, and then you have a deadline. There's a deadline, just as with a senior championship. You're kind of going through the season, and I'm trying to get the qualifying time, trying to run better, and I wasn't really running well. And one of the reasons I wasn't running well is because I was unable to train a lot. I was really unable to train because of my feet. So the winter had not been the solid winter that I had necessarily had the previous year, and so the winter was very difficult because I couldn't run a lot of the time. And I already felt, and this is something that I might want to make a video about as well, because one of the things of being an athlete who struggles with injury is there's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of stigma that comes with being that athlete in the group that's always injured, being an athlete in a group that people think you just don't want to train, people think that you're lazy, right? And this is one of the things that was kind of plaguing me. So generally speaking, you get different types of sprinters. So not every sprinter is going to be a 1, 2 and a 4 sprinter. Not every sprinter is more 2, 4. Some sprinters are genuinely more 100, more 60, 100, whatever. And I kind of fall more to the 100 category. Like, can be very good at 60, never really had a good chance to really compete at it, but I believe I can be. I always said my best event would be 150 meters if there was 150 meters, but I'm more that kind of a sprinter, right? So naturally, you know, built more muscular, so the lactic hits me a lot quicker than someone who maybe, you know, more geared towards the 2-4. So in a group where you've got different abilities and everyone's kind of expected to do the same type of training at that period of time, it was very difficult mentally as well as emotionally, because I'm not able to train and the competition season start and I'm struggling with injuries. I'm struggling to run because I haven't actually got a lot of running in my legs because I haven't been able to train, unknowing to me that I have stress fractures in my feet, right? And so anyway, I managed to go to the junior England champs for the under 20s and I get selected for Great Britain. I did well enough to then be selected for the relay sport, which is amazing, a world junior championships. It was something that I was looking forward to greatly, and I think at the time as well, I was also on National Lottery funding. I think it might have been called World Class Talent at the time. I can't remember these things, you know, crazy, absolutely crazy. I never thought I would forget, but I think it was called World Class Talent. I think it was called that, but I was on National Lottery funding at the time. So you have your meetings with your person, can't remember the names of anything right now, but I don't know now when I actually let them know. I'm not trying to say this to, you know, put a bad name on my coach at the time, but he did say like to not mention it previously, right? Because you're trying to qualify and you want to qualify, but I don't recommend this, you know, as an older athlete, you know, just further along in my life journey in general. It would have been wise to mention it earlier on in the journey, because then I could have got help earlier on, and also I wouldn't have been in a position I ended up being in, right? So what ended up happening was that now that I qualified, I had to let them know, because you have to do relay training, all of these things, and I'm struggling. I can't really run. Like, even to do the champ, it's like one of those things where I can't run for a week or whatever before the champ, because I'm just trying to save my feet, right? And so essentially I ended up getting a scan, and I kid you not, it was like the day before or 2 days before we're gonna fly out for the World Junior Championship. I get a call from Harry King at the time, who was the relay or sprints manager for GB Junior. It's like, we've got the results of your scan, Tarima. Obviously he's upset as well, as I'm devastated, right? And he's like, unfortunately you're not gonna be able to come. The World Junior Championship, what other championship as a junior is bigger than that? That is the biggest championship. And why was I unable to go? Literally because of my feet. Not just because of that, but literally because I didn't highlight it. I didn't flag it earlier on. You know, he even said on the phone call, he's like, why didn't you say it before? And obviously I was going under the advice of my coach at the time. And, you know, looking back, like I said, I wouldn't do that again. I would now say it earlier. And obviously, even though it can seem like, oh, you know, I'm limiting my chances of being selected. And it's true, but it was more devastating to now literally have the kit, have everything, and literally a couple of days before you're gonna fly, you've planned out everything, now you're not going. Like, that was heartbreaking. That was so heartbreaking. So looking back, you know, I would have done a lot of things differently, and it wouldn't have just been in the summer in competing. It would have gone all the way back to the beginning, where now I'm having an issue because first of all, you don't know what the issue is, right? So a lot of times you can avoid this kind of heartbreak by just dealing with issues earlier on in the process. So it was all the way back in winter that I started to notice an issue with my feet, and there is a type of mentality that comes with the older generation of coaches, you know, the way that they were coached kind of sometimes, and they pass it down, and it's not bad because it's work, but you get different types of athletes. You have to be aware because not everyone's body can respond the same way to the same type of training. And like I said, I'm not trying to bash my coach or whatever, because he did very well with me and he was able to help me to achieve a lot as a junior, right? But the thing is that looking back on that season, there's so much we could have done differently from training, because if I'm complaining every time we're doing certain types of longer runs and my feet are literally flaring up to the point where I can't walk on it, like it's so painful, it can't be a thing where it's just like almost just to suck it up and get on with it sort of thing. There has to be a way to address this. And again, you know, of course at the time I could have gone to just get it checked out and stuff like that, and I guess without a scan it really was difficult to know. And being in a position where I was on lottery funding is something I could have had access to a lot earlier had I had said, but then again I was being advised not to say anything because of the fear of maybe being taken off of funding or maybe not having an opportunity to be selected. If an athlete feels that fear, it's going to restrict their ability to be open, and knowing that they may be dropped just because they're injured, it does more damage than good, I think. So yeah, I would say deal with issues as early as possible. You know, if you are someone who's like on funding or you have an opportunity or whatever it is, whether it's funding, sponsorship, any of these kind of things, and there's this stigma, this fear, I would just say that honesty is the best policy. Honestly, honesty is the best policy. And yes, there can be this fear that, you know, I'm going to miss out on this opportunity, but the thing is that things always come to the light in the end, and I say this generally in life anyway. And honestly, I think the fact that I didn't deal with it earlier, yes, I ended up being taken off of the team at the last moment, and that was even more painful than had it been that I never actually got the opportunity, right? I mean, it depends, because you could say it the other way too, but at the end of the day, had I dealt with it earlier, I still might have had the opportunity and actually have gone, right? But then at the same time, I think not dealing with it earlier on, and also the stigma that kind of continued in the journey. So now, you know, if I fast forwarded to say like 2011 and 12, where again I still was dealing with stress fractures from 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, even though 10 I didn't compete too much. But at the end of the day, that's followed me for like 5-6 years, stress fractures. And I really believe it's because I didn't deal with it earlier on properly, and not just dealing with it by finding out what the problem is, but even in terms of how my training was and realizing that, okay, this is an overuse injury, so we need to limit, modify, adjust the type of training that Trima's doing, that I'm doing, so that, you know, my foot doesn't actually get the same issue over and over again. There has to be other ways to work around this. So yes, if that means having to limit the amount that you run, or working around things so that you get the most quality out of sessions rather than going for quantity. And these are the kind of things that as a coach and as an athlete, again, I'm not going to put it on athletes, especially if you're a teenager, right? But you know, if you're a little bit further along in your career, it's something that you can talk about with your coach more openly. If you are self-coach, it's something to consider. And again, if you're a younger athlete watching us and you're dealing with something but you're afraid to tell your coach or whoever because of that stigma, because of, you know, fear of maybe missing out on certain things, just deal with it as early as possible and create a plan based on the information that you now have. So had I known earlier on this is a stress fracture, stress fractures are because of, you know, overuse and these kind of things, and especially the ball of your foot as a sprinter that you are striking the ground with, all the forces going through that area, so you need it. And if I'm in pain there, I can't produce forward, I can't put my foot down the way that I need to. So regardless if I continue training, I'm not going to be able to run fast anyway because I'm in pain, right? So that followed me through, like I said, through to 2011, 12. And yes, in 2011 I had the opportunity again. I was grateful to be able to make the under 23 team again for the relay this time, again with a very difficult season. And now because of that pain in my foot, the injuries in my foot, it trickled up my body. So I had knee problems, started having problems with hamstring tendonitis after that, and that became a thing that continued as well. And it's not funny but at the end of the day, had I dealt with it earlier, had we modified my training, then I may have had better opportunities, rather than just, you know, this thing where you're just like, I literally would do things like stick my foot in a bucket, go and do the next rep, stick my foot in a bucket, go and do the next rep. You know, I think perhaps there's times for that. If you're literally at a championship now, then that may be that. But if it's a case where it's winter and you can modify things, give yourself a better chance to not only for that season but for a longevity in your career, because that now became 6 years of stress fractures that ideally I didn't have to go through had we had identified the problem earlier, created a plan earlier, and just modified my training so that I'm still able to get quality out of my sessions, but that my body's able to still, you know, produce force and not trying to compensate with other areas now, causing further injuries. So guys, that's a little bit of insight into some of the things that I've done. I've got so many more stories like this. So if this has been useful, beneficial, eye-opening for you, if you have questions, let me know in the comment section below, guys. Did you like this video? It was different. I just thought I would share a bit about my journey, you know, give you some advice as to what you shouldn't do, you know, some of the mistakes that I made, and hopefully that you wouldn't make the same mistake and hinder your career in that way as well. One of the things that I wish that I had used my training diary for at the time was just to keep more of a record of when I started to feel pain and what kind of session caused me to feel pain, because that would have helped me to deal with the issue earlier. So if you haven't actually seen my video about a training diary and its benefits, then check out that video over here. And if you haven't seen this video where I talk about how a training diary can actually help you deal with injuries, then make sure to check that out as well. And I'll see you guys on another Friday. Bye guys.